Today we gotta have a serious conversation. It's about the African diaspora, and this video is gonna be coming to you from a foundational Black American perspective about the diaspora war. As to why there seems to be a disagreement between Black Americans and other Black people who come from the African diaspora. Well, this article came out recently. It's from the LA Times. Black immigrants face more discrimination in the US. The source is sometimes surprising. So you would think with this kind of article, where they're trying to demonize and make Black Americans look bad by making us look like we're discriminated against Black immigrants, you would think that by the actual stats, the actual crime stats, the hate crime stats, that we are the majority. You would think that there was this universal African diaspora agreement about Black issues in America, that there wouldn't be data that would demonstrate as to why some of us have issues with certain people who come here who happen to look just like us. Because many of those who look just like us happen to fall into that old adage, not all skin folks are kin folks. And we're going to get deeper into this story and other stories to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So this story features a story of a woman from the African diaspora. And this article came out in the LA Times, and they're trying to paint Black Americans as these evil monsters who just don't want Black immigrants to come here. And that's been the prevailing narrative, that we are jealous of them, that we are secretly hateful, that we have this tribal beef, and that is not a thing. And we're going to explore that in this video. Now, to give you some background as to the status of immigration and the history of immigration in this country, it wasn't until 1965 that people could really come here from different countries who weren't white. In fact, I wanted to give a non-biased source, a non-foundational Black American source, a non-Black American source. This is from the Asian American Education Project, right? And they're pointing out the fact that it was the civil rights movement in the 1960s, spearheaded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the long-fought efforts of African Americans led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 64, basically outlawed discrimination on the basis of race. The passage of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 65 completely removed the quota system. So the precursor to even getting Black immigrants here was us fighting. Foundational Black Americans, the Black descendants of American slaves, fighting for you to even get here. So how in the world could any Black immigrant fix their mouth to say that we are against you when it was us that even brought you here in the first place? We wanted to bring Black immigrants here as reinforcers, as allies. And unfortunately, certain people have this thing where they are not allies. They're trying to be model citizens, like many in the Asian community. So I want you to understand something, right? It is not us who started the beef if we were the reason that Black immigrants even got here in the first place. And now here's just one example of some of the divisions that you see from Black immigrants versus foundational Black Americans or Black descendants of American slaves. This is from the Pew Research Center, right? It's about reparations for slavery. Black adults differ by education and party on the legacy of slavery, but we all mostly agree reparations should be paid. We disagree on what form it should take. It doesn't matter if you're a Black Republican, Black Democrat, Black Liberal, Black Conservative, or you're just in the middle. We all seem to agree on reparations, right? And you see that. But then suddenly something strange happens when you start looking into people's backgrounds, be it linked to foundational Black Americans or be it foreign born. Here's the poll that I'm talking about here. Majority of Black adults think descendants of people enslaved in the US should be repaid. So in the yes category here, 77% of all Black adults say yes. That's a majority, more than 3/4. Black non-Hispanic, 78%. Multiracial non-Hispanic, 73%. That's still a majority. And I made sure to add the multiracial part for all the people who criticize those like me who are in interracial relationships. You see, our children, as you can see, even though they could be light-skinned or multiracial, it still shows they are in majority in favor of reparations. It seems to depend on lineage. It doesn't really seem to depend on if they're multiracial or not, because as you can see, or as you're about to see, people who don't share the lineage of the light-skinned children who have a lineage to, slavery here, chattel slavery here, they appear to want reparations in the majority, almost 3/4. But then you get children from other lineages, as you're about to see, that don't exactly share those sentiments. So I'd rather have a bunch of children here who are light-skinned, who are on code, versus a bunch of children who have my exact same complexion or darker, who are off code, as you're about to see. Black Hispanic, 67%. Interesting pattern you just noticed. Notice that drop off there. So from Black non-Hispanic, 78, to Black Hispanic, 67. That's a double-digit drop in support for reparations. US born, 78. Foreign born, 68. A 10-point double-digit difference. So you're already starting to see a little bit of a split off there. As in, some of the foreign-born people don't have a connection to the legacy and the lineage here, so you don't care. You're gonna go against something that you don't really care about, or in places like California, wouldn't even qualify. They're speaking on something that you don't even qualify for. You get over here. Majority of black adults who want reparations think education and business assistance will be extremely or very helpful forms of repayment for slavery. But you look at the cash payments section, not many of us are going against it, except foreign-born. Only 52% of foreign-born black people want cash payments, while 71 for US born. So you're seeing a bit of a difference there. Almost 20 points of difference. And it's very interesting, right? Being black is extremely very important. It's higher amongst the people who want cash payments versus the people who don't want it, who think it's less important to be black. Isn't that interesting? I see you're going to see a pattern with that with our friends from the African diaspora. And many black immigrants, they come around and they say, oh, black Americans are just discriminated against me, without giving full context. And here's some of the context. This is actually a study from the International Journal of Intercultural Relations. And the title is, quote, I disagree with a lot of values, end quote, exploring black immigrant agency in ethnic racial socialization. And so if you go down into the study here, you will find that a lot of people in the black immigrant community, they have views towards black Americans that are pretty interesting. For generations, the relationship between immigrant and non-immigrant black people in the US has been described as strained. Oh, so it's not a new thing. So people are blaming FBAs, blaming Dane Calloway, Tariq Nasheed, blaming the Black Authority, blaming Professor Black Truth, blaming me, ACAB Devil, blaming everybody, right? When this was a long-standing thing for generations. So it's not something that just popped up. It's always been there. Why has it been there when we were the ones who I've already shown you made sure black immigrants got here in the first place? Perhaps it's not coming from our end. From the black American point of view, black immigrants have been thought to espouse anti-black American rhetoric in an attempt to culturally distinguish themselves, which has led black Americans to likewise distance themselves and criticize black immigrants for overlooking systemic racism. Oh, so this is an eye-opener, isn't it? It's not something that is new. It's something that has existed for a long time. Let's get into some of the reasons why that exists. And you see, many black immigrants don't talk about some of the slurs they call us, right? They call us things like Jareer. Jareer is a Somali term that is intended for black Americans. It is derogatory. And when you ask certain people from the Somali community about it, they will lie about it, right? Even though this is Urban Dictionary, everybody knows it's true. And many black immigrants will even lie about the word akata. It is a derogatory term that is meant for black Americans. And this article here from Medium kind of shows it. The word akata is a term of degradation, not a term of endearment. It is a divisive slur, and as a result, it has caused the opposite of solidarity. It has contributed to the otherizing of Native black Americans and has driven a wedge between those who use the word akata and those who get called the word akata. And he gives multiple examples here of people using it in a way that is derogatory but meant for black Americans. It is meant to insult us. You call us these names and then you come over here and then as soon as someone says anything to you or you make up something, right? And we point this out, you will then say, oh no, it's a term of endearment. Oh, you don't know the language. Just making up lies. You don't build relationships based on lies. But all kinds of slurs, Yankee, Jareer, Akata, I mean all kinds of ones, right? That were meant just for black Americans. And not just any black Americans, because you don't mean that for the black immigrants who come here. You mean that for the foundational black Americans, the black descendants of American slaves, the native black Americans here. This kind of stuff has been going on for generations. We are the ones who fought to bring you here, and then oftentimes they side with the white supremacists, or they will call us these slurs and then lie about it. And I want you to see this interesting piece from the globalists, right? There's one part of this article, the different experiences of the two groups, black Americans and black immigrants. I want you to see something, right? To understand the deep division that exists between African Americans and Africans, one has to examine the background of the two groups. Before migrating to the US, most Africans have typically dealt with white Americans who went to Africa as Peace Corps volunteers, missionaries, doctors, or teachers. These Americans acted as mentors and guardians to the Africans and developed positive relationships with them. When they come to the US, it has been my experience that Africans can easily identify with white Americans because they understand each other. before migrating to the US, the majority of Africans have had little to no direct negative experiences with whites. They simply do not hate them. On the other hand, most African Americans grew up in black neighborhoods where they learned from older generations the history of slavery and the cruelty it inflicted on the black race. Furthermore, they have usually experienced firsthand and in their communities the legacies of racism that still exists in the US. With this background, many African Americans are generally not predisposed to trust white Americans, and they look down on those African immigrants who express respect or admiration for white Americans. So you can see whereas you have a division there. Africans have had great experiences with, all the programs where you put these African children on TV with flies flying all over them, white savior complex. You say, oh, for 25 cents a day, you can feed this poor child. That's been the African experience, being colonized, and then the colonizers coming over and giving you bread and cookies. Black Americans here, we're not fooled by that. Many of us are in interracial relationships, but we understand our overall place. And what some people don't talk about is the I know black stuff. You see it from the black Hispanics, the black Latinos. You see it often, right? This piece here from Medium points out, I know black, I Dominican. You see this across the African diaspora, right? You see people claiming that they are not black, they're somehow a very dark Hispanic person or a dark white person. You see this often. And this person is Dominican. They're talking about themselves growing up as Dominican and black, and they're giving their experience. Now, this comes and clashes with us. This comes from the Pew Research Center, right? Most black adults say being black is very important to how they see themselves. This is actually polled from the US black population. So you see how we see ourselves here. How do you think that's gonna clash with I know black? How do you think that's gonna clash with that, man? And finally, you see this garbage, right? I mean, we went over the history. We went over some of the attitudes. We've actually used the Pew Research Center. We used multiple news articles. We've went all over the place here, right? You see trash articles like this suggesting that black Americans are out here going after black immigrants, right? You look at the Center for Public Integrity, black Americans still are victims of hate crimes more than any other group. It's from 2018. And that holds true even now. Do you know who's the primary perpetrator? White people. If that's the case, if we've been the number one target of hate crimes since the FBI has been looking at those numbers, why does this article even exist? You gotta think to yourself, is this article meant to undermine black Americans? Based on all the evidence you've seen in this complete video, and based on the number one perpetrator being white people and us being number one target of hate crimes in the US according to the FBI, what do you think the true intentions of this article is? And why do you think we have a diaspora war? Do you think it's because of this of disingenuous stuff like this? The lies, the deceit, and the inability for certain communities to be honest about their riffraffs and about some of the division that they cause? I think it's time for some honesty, and it shouldn't come from our end. We fought for you to come here. You weren't saying that when MLK was getting his butt whipped to get you behind here. You weren't saying that when we were marching the streets to get you behind here. But now, suddenly, it's I know black. Now, suddenly, we are the Jareer. Now, all of a sudden, we are the Yankee. Now, all of a sudden, we are the Abid. Now, all of a sudden, we are the Akata.